The past holds many secrets, and we're here to uncover them. For over 3,000 years, the golden mask of Pharaoh Tutankhamun remained hidden in the Valley of the Kings. This artifact, standing about 21 inches tall, shows just how talented and artistic the ancient Egyptians were. But no one expected that X-rays would reveal its biggest secret. King Tutankhamun was the last ruler of his family in the 18th dynasty. He became pharaoh at just 9 years old and ruled for only 10 years before dying unexpectedly. To be honest, in ancient Egypt, he was mostly forgotten by the rulers who came after him. His tomb wasn't considered important enough. Even grave robbers didn't bother with it. That might sound a little sad, but it turned out to be a great thing for us. Because his tomb was practically forgotten, it was left untouched, while others in the Valley of the Kings were looted. When it was discovered in 1922, it was perfectly preserved, with more than 5,000 valuable items inside. That discovery instantly made King Tut world famous and one of the most iconic pharaohs of all time. Among those treasures, the most breathtaking piece was his golden mask. It's said to be a precise representation of his face, or at least it was supposed to be. We'll come back to that part. The idea behind this detailed mask was that his soul would recognize him in the afterlife and return to his mummified body. This was a core belief in ancient Egyptian religion. That way, he could live on forever in the next world. The mask's intricate details made it clear that it was extremely hard to create. But people didn't realize just how complex it truly was until years later. The first X-rays of the mask were taken in 1967. Back then, the main reason for the scan was to help with its safe transport. It was headed to Paris for an exhibition, and this was the first time it ever left Egypt. The scans would also help detect any changes during the exhibition and might offer clues about how the mask was originally made. At the time, they probably didn't grasp how sophisticated the craftsmanship was. I mean, ancient Egyptian goldsmiths didn't have modern welding tools. So, how did they make something this refined? In 2007, new X-rays gave us some answers. Turns out, they didn't use pure 24-karat gold. The mask was actually made from 23-karat gold, meaning it was mixed with another material. Experts found that the gold sheets contained a bit of copper, a reddish metal, probably added to make the gold more flexible and easier to shape. They shaped the sheets by heating and hammering them repeatedly, but the mask still had more secrets to give up. In 2015, just a year before staff at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo were preparing it for display, the mask's long beard accidentally fell off. Another theory is that it had loosened over time and eventually dropped on its own. Either way, the beard falling off caused a lot of panic. After all, this is one of Cairo's top tourist attractions. Experts had to fix it quickly. The restoration started with a detailed examination of the mask's condition. To do this, they created a full 3-dimensional scan of the artifact. That's when they stumbled across something very interesting. Inside the beard, there was a small golden tube, an unusual feature. It was likely used by the ancient Egyptians to attach the beard to the rest of the mask. This once again proved that the mask's construction was way more complex than previously believed. But the mystery doesn't end there. Remember how we said the mask was believed to show the true face of Tutankhamun? That might not actually be the case. Some popular theories suggest the mask wasn't even meant for him in the first place. It may have originally been made for someone else entirely. A 2015 study proposed that the mask was actually designed for a female pharaoh, most likely his stepmother, the famous and beautiful Queen Nefertiti. The biggest clue comes from an inscription on the mask. At first glance, it looked like it said Tutankhamun's name. But on closer inspection, researchers noticed there was another name underneath his. It seemed the original royal name had been overwritten, and the original name translates to Queen Nefertiti. There's another detail on the mask that had been ignored for years, adding more mystery. Remember how we said later, pharaohs didn't really honor Tutankhamun? One clue supporting that is the pierced ears on the mask. Some researchers believe King Tut stopped wearing earrings once he grew out of childhood, so if he died around age 18, he probably wouldn't have been shown with pierced ears. That supports the idea that the mask may have originally belonged to Nefertiti, or at least to someone else entirely. King Tut's mysterious tomb and the secrets that still haunt it. King Tutankhamun wasn't actually related to the man we call King Tut today, but his golden mask isn't the only mystery surrounding him. In fact, his entire tomb is full of puzzles. Historians recently found clues that suggest the place where King Tut was supposed to be buried may have been changed at the very last minute. For years, experts have wondered why a pharaoh who ruled for 9 years ended up in such a small, modest tomb, especially when compared to the grand tombs of other pharaohs. His tomb just seemed too simple. The idea that a king like Tut would have such a basic final resting place didn't really match the power and importance he should have had in ancient Egypt. So, what happened? It looks like it may have had something to do with his successor, the pharaoh who took over after Tutankhamun died. Some researchers believe that this successor went out of his way to erase Tut from Egyptian history. One theory even suggests that he was the one who made the quick decision to bury King Tut in a smaller, less impressive tomb. When experts examined this successor's own tomb, they found something really interesting. A large wall painted with baboons, the same kind of artwork found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It seems like the same person may have chosen the art for both burial sites. In fact, the overall design and decoration of the two tombs are nearly identical, which suggests there was a shared hand behind both. But there's one major difference. The other tomb is much bigger and far more impressive, more fitting for a king, despite sharing a similar style with Tut's. That supports the theory that the successor arranged both tombs himself. Since Tut died young and unexpectedly, at just 18, his planned tomb may not have been finished in time. Pharaohs usually start building their tombs while they're still alive to make sure everything's ready. But with Tut dying so early, there just wasn't enough time. The theory goes that the new pharaoh took advantage of the situation. He gave Tut a smaller tomb and saved the grand one for himself. Experts believe this explains why Tut's tomb is so simple, and how it became so easy to erase his memory from history. But in the end, the story of King Tut's mask and tomb is still packed with mystery and excitement. Every new discovery adds a bit more clarity to what really happened all those years ago. And one thing's for sure, ancient Egypt still has a lot of secrets to reveal. King Tut will continue to fascinate people for generations. And when you hear the word mummy, you might feel a shiver go down your spine, probably because most of us associate mummies with creepy characters from horror movies. But in reality, mummies have helped us learn a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and how they dealt with the loss of loved ones. And the most famous mummies in the world? The ancient Egyptians, of course. They believed in some form of life after death, as long as certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the body through mummification and placing it in a fully equipped tomb. Think of it like giving the dead a furnished apartment in the afterlife. So, Why did they believe in all this? Because they were deeply connected to nature. They watched natural cycles closely, like the sun rising and setting each day, or how plants would grow again, even after wilting. They believed the powerful god Osiris, who symbolized death and rebirth, played a key role in the afterlife. To prepare for the next life, ancient Egyptians followed specific rituals, like mummification. This involved using things like honey resin and incense to preserve the body. No mummy is more famous than that of King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled Egypt over 3,000 years ago. The problem with royal tombs, though, is that most were looted over the centuries. People knew these rulers were buried with treasure, so tomb robbers struck early. But when Tut's tomb was opened in 1922, people were amazed. It hadn't been looted like the others. That's how well it had been hidden. Inside, his mummy was wrapped in 3 coffins, including one made of solid gold. The treasures in his tomb gave us incredible insight into what life was like in ancient Egypt. Studying his mummy also helped us learn about the culture and customs of that era. We even learned more about his health and family thanks to DNA testing. Scientists discovered that Tut had malaria and a foot problem that probably made it hard for him to walk. Another famous pharaoh was Ramses II, who ruled for 68 years, which was a long time back then. He was known for his military campaigns and massive building projects. A lot of his monuments still stand today, including a huge statue of him. Ramses was about 6 feet tall and lived to around 90 years old, pretty impressive for his time. After examining his mummy, scientists concluded that he may have suffered from a medical condition that affected his spine. Now, remember those tomb robbers we mentioned earlier? They might be the reason Ramses II ended up in an ordinary coffin, hidden in a secret collection of royal mummies in Deir el-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Fortunately, archaeologists were able to identify him because the record of his journeys had been written on the wrappings around his body. The mummification process itself was extremely demanding. In ancient Egypt, it could take an astonishing 70 days to complete. A specially chosen person would recite a very specific speech while carefully handling the body and drying it out using a kind of salt called natron. They also used linen and resin to give the body a more lifelike appearance before wrapping it in cloth. To the ancient Egyptians, the tomb was just as important as the body. For example, the walls of King Tutankhamun's tomb were decorated with detailed artwork showing his journey to the afterlife, from his funeral procession to his passage through the underworld. The Egyptians believed that everyone made this journey after death. That's why pharaohs filled their tombs with items and paintings to help them on their spiritual path. In addition to this, the tomb walls were often covered in spells from a special book, essentially a collection of poems, that the Egyptians believed would help guide the dead to the afterlife. Speaking of how important that journey was, people even placed food in ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists found 36 jars of ancient drinks and baskets of dried fruits believed to have been left to help him on his journey. The Egyptians believed that travelling to the afterlife would take a long time, so they left behind plenty of supplies like food and water to support their loved ones. Pharaohs also had fine clothes and beautiful jewellery placed in their tombs to make sure their journey was a stylish one. These included different kinds of linen garments like tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, plus lots of golden jewellery with gemstones, like bracelets, buckles, amulets, necklaces, rings, and even protective scarab beetles. Some tombs even had fans made of ivory and ostrich feathers to help keep the king cool in the afterlife. Some ancient rulers were even buried with boats in their tombs. For example, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid of Giza as his burial place, and a large boat was discovered nearby. As for King Tut, while no full-size boat was found, he was buried with several boat paddles. Instead of a boat, he had 3 chariots and many staffs made of valuable materials. This might suggest he preferred to journey through the afterlife by land rather than sea. Among the most fascinating objects found near ancient mummies were bottles of oils and perfumes. After all, if the rulers were going to travel in style, they might as well smell good too, right? Some even had ancient board games buried with them, many made from valuable materials like gold or ivory. One of the most popular games was called Senet, which was a lot like modern-day chess and very common among ancient Egyptians. Even though the Egyptians have the world's most famous mummies, they weren't actually the first to invent mummification. In fact, it all started in South America with an ancient civilization called the Chinchorro. As far as we know, they were the first people to mummify their dead, about 2,000 years before the Egyptians began their own burial rituals. We can learn a lot about ancient rulers by studying these mummies, but until recently, we had no real idea what they looked like when they were alive. That changed not long ago when archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian artifacts discovered some very special mummy portraits. These were highly detailed paintings of individuals created while they were still alive, often painted on wood rather than canvas, and incredibly realistic and beautiful. Researchers even used these portraits to diagnose diseases by comparing them with the actual mummies. Some of the portraits even matched jewelry that was later found on the mummies themselves. The recent discovery of several mummy portraits in central Egypt is a big deal, because it marks the first time in over a century that new ones have been found. Interestingly, mummification has occurred naturally in different parts of the world. It can happen without any human involvement, thanks to specific natural conditions like extreme cold or heat, low oxygen levels, or accidental exposure to chemical preservatives. These conditions prevent bacteria from growing, allowing the body to stay more or less intact. One of the most famous naturally preserved mummies is Ötzi the Iceman, a man who lived about 5,000 years ago in Europe. He was discovered in the Alps in 1991 by an Austrian author. At first, scientists thought he was a modern mountain climber because his body was so well preserved. But after they removed the Iceman from the glacier, they realized he actually came from the Copper Age. When you hear about ancient artifacts, you probably don't imagine them just hanging around somewhere or dangling from a tree branch. The truth is, for most of the ancient artifacts we now see in museums around the world, archaeologists had to do a lot of digging to find them. You see, buildings tend to crumble over time if they're not taken care of. Sometimes people reused old building materials, which meant the original structures got torn down in the process. Other times, houses were simply abandoned, and once they were exposed to the elements, like rain and sunlight, they didn't stand a chance. Some of them just collapsed from plain old erosion. So, how does a piece of architecture survive for thousands of years? Usually by being buried deep underground. But how did it end up buried in the first place? Well, it's kind of a comedy of errors. Ancient cities had a habit of raising their ground levels bit by bit, almost like stacking blocks. These settlements were always busy gathering food and building materials to keep up with their growing populations. And honestly, cleaning up trash and debris wasn't really a priority. So, when it came time to build new homes, they just built on top of the old ones. It was easier and saved a lot of time and effort. But that's not all. Rivers would sometimes flood and leave behind a layer of sediment over city floors, burying older buildings even more. And, in dry desert areas, wind would constantly blow sand and dust everywhere. It was a full-time job, just trying to keep things clean. A funny example of this is the Great Sphinx. Its head was buried in sand until archaeologists uncovered it in 1817. Some ancient cities eventually got completely buried simply because they were abandoned. With no people around to control nature, plants took over. Seeds sprouted everywhere, sucking up carbon dioxide from the air and growing more and more, adding layers of organic matter. The roots even locked the soil in place, creating layer after layer of earth, like a giant DIY project led by Mother Nature, with plants as her loyal assistants. Digging into the secrets of ancient civilizations isn't just about discovering lost worlds. It's also about unearthing treasures hidden under centuries of history. But here's the big question. How do archaeologists even know where to dig if everything's covered in layers of dirt, debris, and plant roots? Well, they don't just guess. They usually have a system. For starters, archaeologists aren't always the ones who pick where to dig. Let me explain. Let's say you're a developer and you want to build a luxury housing complex. In some areas, local laws require a site inspection before any construction begins. That means you'll need to bring in specialists like archaeologists, geologists, or paleontologists to examine the ground. If they find anything significant, they'll pause the project and dig in to study the artifacts or environmental remains. That's a fancy term for organic stuff. But what about sites that don't involve bulldozers and hard hats? Well, archaeologists have plenty of tricks up their sleeves when it comes to finding ancient hotspots. They dig deep into historical records, almost like detectives, piecing together clues from old documents and maps to figure out where people used to live or gather. If the site was previously visited, or if there are records of earlier excavations, that can give them a great head start. Before they ever start digging, archaeologists often do a visual survey of the area. Using a grid system, they walk the land and keep their eyes peeled for any artifacts near the surface. Things like stone tools, old glass, or even ancient trash heaps. Yes, those are valuable too. These sharp-eyed explorers can often spot signs of past human activity much faster than the average person. If they come across something called midden soil, a fancy term for ancient garbage dumps, it's a pretty good sign that people once lived there. And archaeologists don't just rely on shovels and trowels. They've got a whole toolkit of specialized instruments. Their secret weapon? Geophysical tools, tech that helps them detect what's hidden underground without ever turning over a single clump of dirt. Take the resistivity meter, for example. This clever gadget measures the electrical properties of the soil and can detect buried features or artifacts. So, something like a buried wall, for instance, will show a different resistance reading compared to the surrounding soil. Tools like magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar work in similar ways. They help reveal possible signs of ancient treasures hidden underground. And who could forget our trusty friend GPS? Archaeologists use it to create super-accurate maps of excavation sites, kind of like a high-tech treasure map that leads them straight to the gold. Some archaeologists even explore the world's most important historical sites virtually. Let's head to the UK, for example. There, you'll find a fascinating place called Stonehenge. It's just one of many scattered stones in the area, but this one really steals the show. These massive ancient rocks are arranged in a strange outer circle and a horseshoe-shaped inner structure, with some smaller stones thrown in for good measure. Believe it or not, these stones have been standing there for over 5,000 years. Now that's what you call rock-solid durability. Here's where it gets interesting. According to local legends, the legendary wizard Merlin used his magic staff to move these stones all the way from Ireland. Apparently, a group of giants had originally gathered them there, but Merlin thought they'd look much better in their current location. Some people believe Stonehenge is just the remains of a ruined Roman spiritual building. Still, it's more widely believed that our Bronze Age ancestors built it, using only basic tools and limited technology, to create this massive masterpiece. Pretty impressive, right? Sadly, there's still a lot we don't know about Stonehenge. Its original purpose is still a mystery. There are plenty of theories, but no solid agreement among scientists. What we do know is that it aligns perfectly with the sunrise during both the summer and winter solstices. Now, let's take a trip to another mind-blowing site, the ancient city of Pompeii. Picture this. Mount Vesuvius, the infamous troublemaker, throws a volcanic tantrum and buries the entire Roman city in ash, turning it into a time capsule. Pompeii is located just outside modern-day Naples in Italy. Fast forward to 1748, when a group of explorers stumbled upon Pompeii and uncovered a treasure trove of incredibly well-preserved artifacts. Streets, houses, food, probably a bit stale by then. Shiny jewellery, detailed sculptures, colourful murals, everyday household items, and even the remains of animals and people. It was like the ultimate archaeological party. Pompeii had everything: homes, luxurious villas, a giant 20,000-seat amphitheatre, cosy artisan shops, and even bars and rest stops. And let's not forget the luxurious bathhouses where people went to seriously treat themselves. There was also the Temple of Apollo, where folks gathered for their daily dose of worship. And right at the heart of the city was the Forum of Pompeii, the social and political hub where all the cool people hung out. Guess what? Pompeii is so extraordinary that it was added to UNESCO's World Heritage List in 1997. That's like the Hall of Fame for historical greatness. The list includes other iconic places like the Taj Mahal in India, the Acropolis in Athens, and of course, the Great Pyramids of Egypt. The only one of the original 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing today. But did you know the pyramids of Giza weren't the only pyramids out there, and not even the first? Yep, there were earlier pyramids, though not as famous. Some were even abandoned before they were completed, because building pyramids took a lot of time, and not every pharaoh lived long enough to see theirs finished. In ancient Egypt, people believed that pharaohs were chosen by the gods to act as their representatives on earth, and they were expected to become gods themselves in the afterlife. The pyramid complexes were built to ensure they had everything they'd need in the next life. These included not only the pyramid tombs themselves, but also palaces and temples. Inside the pyramids, the burial chambers were packed with things the king might need in the afterlife, like furniture, food, golden vessels, and all kinds of treasures. In fact, the first pyramid was built about 80 years before the famous ones at Giza. All in all, around 100 pyramids were constructed in Egypt, though many were never completed. Subscribe and come explore the forgotten past with us. Like, comment, and support our journey to uncover the truth and ancient adventures. See you on your next